The house in the woods. The town had always whispered about the house in the woods. Some said it was cursed. Others said it was just an old house, nothing special, nothing dangerous. But no one ever went inside. Daniel didn't believe in ghost stories. He was 32, a teacher, a logical man. When he found out that the house was for sale at a very low price, he didn't hesitate. He wanted a quiet place, away from the city noise. A house surrounded by trees, where he could write, think, and live in peace. The first time he saw it, the house looked normal. Maybe a little old, maybe a little forgotten. The windows were dusty, the garden overgrown. The wooden door was heavy and cold under his hand. When he stepped inside, the air smelled of wood and something else, something old, something he couldn't name. The rooms were large, with high ceilings and dark wooden floors. The furniture was still there, as if the last owner had left in a hurry. A clock stood in the corner, silent. A mirror hung on the wall, its glass foggy with age. Everything was covered in dust. Daniel moved in quickly. He liked the quiet, the feeling of space. At night, he sat in the old leather chair by the fireplace, reading. The house creaked sometimes, but old houses always made noises. The wind moved through the trees outside, and the darkness around the house was deep and heavy. Then the strange things began. It started with small things. The kitchen light was on in the morning, even though he was sure he had turned it off. The old rocking chair on the porch moved slightly, as if someone had just been sitting there. His books were not where he left them. One night, he woke up suddenly. Silence. Not even the wind. A heavy stillness filled the house. Then, from the hallway, a soft creak. A slow step on the wooden floor. Daniel sat up, heart pounding. He told himself it was nothing. Just the house settling. Just his imagination. But the feeling in his stomach was something else, something cold, something warning him. He got up, walked to the hallway. The light switch didn't work. The darkness in front of him was thick, endless. He reached for his phone, turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, showing only the empty hallway. Then he saw it, the mirror at the end of the hall. His reflection was there, but something was wrong. His own face looked back at him, but his eyes weren't right. They were darker, deeper. And then slowly the reflection smiled. But Daniel hadn't moved. His breath caught in his throat. He stepped back, hitting the wall. The reflection didn't change. It just kept smiling. And then slowly it raised its hand and knocked on the glass. Once. Twice. Daniel turned and ran back to his bedroom, slamming the door shut. The knocking from the mirror didn't stop. Daniel barely slept. The knocking on the mirror had stopped after a few minutes, but the silence that followed was worse. He had never felt afraid in his own home before. But now every shadow, every creak, felt like something watching, something waiting. In the morning, he forced himself to go back to the hallway. The mirror stood there, the glass normal, his reflection looking as it should. No strange smile, no dark eyes. Had it been a dream? A trick of his tired mind? He shook the thought away and decided to focus on the day. He cleaned, unpacked more boxes, and made coffee. Normal things. Safe things. But the house had changed. He felt it in small ways. The kitchen was colder than before. The air in the hallway was heavy, like walking through water. And then there were the whispers. At first, he thought it was the wind. Soft, distant, like voices carried from far away. But the longer he listened, the clearer they became. Not words exactly, just sounds, murmurs in the walls, whispers under the floorboards. Daniel tried to ignore them. He went to town, bought groceries, stopped at a small cafe. He chatted with the barista, asked about the house. "You bought that place," the man said, raising an eyebrow. "Brave." Daniel frowned. "Why brave?" The barista hesitated. Then he shrugged. "People say things. Strange stories. But you know, every old house has its ghosts." Daniel laughed, but it felt forced. "I don't believe in ghosts." The barista gave him a look. "Maybe the house doesn't care what you believe." That night, Daniel sat in the living room with his book. He forced himself to relax. The fire crackled. The tea in his cup was warm. Everything was normal, until he looked at the window. The glass reflected the room, the firelight flickering. But something else was there. A shape, standing in the hallway behind him. Daniel turned fast. Nothing, just the empty hall. His pulse pounded. He looked back at the window. The reflection was gone. A whisper brushed against his ear. "So close, too close. You're not alone." Daniel dropped the teacup. It shattered on the floor. He didn't turn around, because he could feel it now, something standing behind him. Watching, waiting. Daniel wanted to leave. He told himself it was ridiculous. This was his home, his fresh start. But reason didn't quiet the weight in his chest, the feeling that he was not supposed to be here. Still, he stayed. He forced himself to act normal. He made breakfast, listened to the radio, even called an old friend just to hear a familiar voice. But the house had its own plans. The whispers grew louder. They didn't come from the walls anymore. They came from the mirror. During the day, it was silent. But at night, when the house settled into darkness, the voice would return. Faint, like someone speaking from far away, their words lost in a glass. One night, Daniel stood in front of the mirror. The air around it was colder, sharper, like stepping into another season. He whispered, "Who are you?" The house answered with silence. Then movement. A shadow flickered deep inside the glass. Not a reflection, not his own body shifting in the dim light. Something inside the mirror. His breath caught. He should walk away. He would walk away. But then, the figure stepped closer, and Daniel saw its eyes. They were hollow, empty, like someone had carved out the soul and left only darkness. The thing opened its mouth, but no sound came out. Then, knock, 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 from the other side of the glass. Daniel stumbled backward, his heartbeat slamming against his ribs. The figure didn't move, but the whisper returned. Soft but clear. "Let me out." The lights flickered. The air turned ice cold. Daniel ran. He didn't look back. Didn't stop until he was outside, gasping in the night air, hands shaking. His breath curled in the cold, but the whisper still clung to him. Inside his head. Inside his bones. "Let me out." Daniel spent the night in his car, parked down the street, watching the house. The windows were dark, silent. Nothing moved inside, but he knew it was still there. By morning, His fear felt ridiculous. A bad dream. Stress. Too much time alone. He forced himself to go back inside. The house smelled stale, like dust and something rotten, but everything was in place. The mirror stood in the hallway, exactly where it had always been. Sunlight reflected off its surface, showing nothing but his tired face. Normal, but Daniel knew better. That night, he avoided looking at the mirror. He kept the lights on, drank too much coffee, but at some point exhaustion won. He woke to silence, not the peaceful kind, the wrong kind, the kind where even walls seemed to hold their breath. And then, a soft click. Daniel's eyes snapped open. The mirror, the crack. It hadn't been there before. A thin, jagged line ran down the glass, splitting the surface like something had pressed against it too hard from the inside. His stomach turned, and then he saw it. The figure, standing just beyond the crack, watching him. But this time, its mouth wasn't empty. It was smiling. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through his skull. The whispering was back, but now it was a song. Slow, mocking. Daniel stumbled backward. His hands trembled. "Let me out." The whisper slid through the air like silk, curling around him. And then, a sharp snap. The crack spread. More lines shot across the glass, splintering the surface. The reflection warped, shifted. Daniel turned and ran, but the voice followed. "You brought me here, Daniel." His heart pounded. He ran to the door, yanked at the handle. Locked. "You let me in." A gust of cold air rushed through the house, slamming into him like a wave. The light flickered, and behind him, a shattering sound. The mirror, breaking open. The sound of shattering glass filled the house. Daniel didn't turn around. He didn't want to see what had come through. He just kept pulling at the locked door, his fingers slipping on the handle. Cold air wrapped around him like fingers trailing up his spine. The whispering had stopped. Now there was only silence. Heavy, waiting. He forced himself to move, to turn his head. The mirror was gone, or at least the glass was. The frame stood empty, nothing but darkness stretching beyond it, like a doorway to nowhere. The floor was covered in shards, but the reflection inside them didn't match reality. In those broken pieces, he saw movement, shadows shifting, reaching. And then, in one jagged shard near his foot, he saw himself. But it wasn't him. His reflection blinked too slowly. Its eyes were too dark. And that smile, wide. Wrong. Then it stepped forward. Daniel stumbled back, but there was nowhere to go. The lights in the house flickered again, and in that split second of darkness, the thing moved. Closer. Daniel's breath hitched. His own voice whispered from the shards. "You shouldn't have come back." The lights returned, and the figure was gone. But the air was heavy. The house felt different. He glanced at the empty mirror frame, heart pounding. Then, behind him, a floorboard creaked. Slow, deliberate. Someone was in the room with him. Daniel didn't move. His whole body tensed, his breath shallow. The floorboard behind him groaned again, a slow, deliberate sound. Not the house settling. Not the wind. Someone was standing there. His fingers curled into a fist, but what could he do? Fight a reflection? A ghost? A thing that shouldn't exist? The air behind him thickened, a presence pressing close. A whisper, almost affectionate, slid against his ear. "You're in my place now." His stomach turned to ice. He spun around. Nothing. No one. But the room had changed. The wallpaper, once faded, was peeling like dead skin, revealing something darker underneath. The furniture was twisted, shapes too long, too stretched. The air smelled of dust and something sweet rotten. He turned to the mirror frame. The empty space where the glass had been wasn't just dark anymore. It was pulsing, breathing, and inside it, in that endless black, he saw himself again. Not just a reflection. Him. Standing there watching. Smiling. Then the other Daniel lifted a hand and waved. Daniel stumbled back. The house groaned as if shifting on its foundation. The lights flickered. When they came back on, the mirror was whole again. And he was inside it. Daniel pounded on the glass. No sound. His mouth opened in a scream, but the house swallowed it whole. Outside the mirror, in the world that had been his, the other Daniel stretched, rolled his shoulders, and turned toward the door. Leaving. Taking his life. Daniel slammed his fists against the glass, his throat raw, but the other him didn't look back. The lights flickered one last time. And then silence. Daniel's fists thudded against the glass, dull and useless. No sound, no impact. His reflection, no, the other him, had already left the room, already stepped into the world that had been his. Panic clawed at Daniel's chest. He turned, scanning the mirror world around him. The room looked the same, but wrong. The colors muted, the air thick and stale. The furniture was still there, but the angles were all slightly off, too sharp, too stretched. And the door didn't lead anywhere. Daniel ran to it, yanking at the handle. Locked. No, worse than locked. It didn't even rattle. As if it had never been meant to open at all. His breath quickened. He pressed his face against the mirror, trying to see through. The other Daniel was there just outside, his movements slow, measured. He stretched his fingers, tested his legs, as if settling into his new body. Then, as if sensing Daniel's gaze, he turned. Their eyes met. A grin stretched across the other Daniel's face. A grin that didn't belong to him. Daniel screamed. He pounded his fists against the glass, but the other him simply gave a small, amused tilt of his head. Then he lifted a single finger to his lips. Shoo! Daniel's blood ran cold. The other Daniel turned away, stepping into the hallway. Walking into his life. Daniel clawed at the mirror, his breath fogging the surface. Then, from behind him, deep in the shadows of the mirror world, a whisper, "You're not the first." Daniel whirled around. The darkness stirred, and something moved. Daniel spun around, heart hammering. The darkness at the edge of the mirror world was shifting, breathing. He wasn't alone. "You're not the first," the voice had said. But where had it come from? His breath came in ragged gasps as he backed away, only to feel the cold, slick surface of the mirror pressing against his spine. His own reflection no longer moved with him. Instead, it stood still, watching, waiting. Then, out of the darkness, figures began to emerge. Dozens of them. Men, women, their faces stretched with despair, some with hands covering their mouths, others with eyes wide in silent screams. They wore different clothes, some modern, others decades old. A few looked like they belonged to a different century altogether. All of them trapped. All of them like him. "He took your place," a voice whispered, close to his ear. Daniel turned sharply, but there was no one there. Just the shifting shadows. "He took all of ours." His chest tightened. He turned back toward the mirror, slamming his hands against the glass. His apartment was just beyond it, his old life, his world. The imposter was there now, sitting in his chair, holding his phone, moving his hands like they had always belonged to him. No one would notice the difference. No one ever did. A sharp breath sounded behind him. Daniel turned just in time to see hands reaching for him, dozens of them, pale and desperate, pulling him into the dark. He screamed, but outside the mirror no one could hear him. And the other Daniel, the new Daniel, simply smiled.